When the city of Kabul fell to Taliban forces in August 2021, Americans breathed a collective sigh of disappointment, frustration, and outrage that a 20-year-long war had come to an end without any apparent victory and no obvious benefit for all of the lives lost and resources spent in a war born out of catastrophe and ending with no satisfying conclusion. As Kabul fell, we saw images of people flooding to the airport, clinging to planes, even falling to their deaths when those planes took off. Parents were handing off their children to strangers in the hopes that they might have a chance at a better life than the one they would have under the Taliban's iron fist. But who are the Taliban? Why are they important? And do they represent real Islam? And what's their relationship to the restaurant that serves tasty pseudo-Mexican food? Well, the Taliban is a militaristic organization that subscribes to a very literal reading of the Quran and who enforces a very strict interpretation of Islamic law. The Taliban have been condemned by the international community for their crimes, which include things like killing citizens, forbidding women and girls to have educations, and demanding that any woman going out in public wear a head covering and be accompanied by a male relative. They've destroyed visible representations of other religions, like the famous Buddhas of Bamiyan. Even before taking over Afghanistan, they told Christians to expect persecution. But the Taliban have been trying to rehabilitate their public image. Newsweek ran a story about how they're trying to rebrand themselves. In fact, they highlighted a message that Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen tweeted the day after Kabul fell. He said, "We assure all diplomats, embassies, consulates, and charitable workers, whether they are international or national, that not only no problem will be created for them on the part of the IEA, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, but a secure environment will be provided to them, inshallah." Newsweek noted that the phrase inshallah translates to God willing, and that's one translation. Another translation, and one that's maybe a little more accurate, is if Allah wills. Now, those of us who understand basic grammar know that the word if is something that is used to introduce a conditional clause. A conditional statement and a guarantee are two completely different things. So, we can only hope that this is genuine because the Taliban's history of brutality leads us to suspect otherwise. Well, how is this rebrand going? Well, let's see a recent picture published by the Taliban just hours after Kabul was captured by military forces. This isn't your granddaddy's terrorist organization. Instead of the Taliban, we've got the Talibros. But really, does anyone actually think that the Taliban is going to all of a sudden have a change of heart? That they're going to stop discriminating against non-Muslims and stop whipping and executing women for minor offenses? And the answer is a lot of people. Naive Western politicians and journalists, mostly. You see, there's this narrative out there that says religious people should be peaceful people. And if you're not a peaceful person, then you're not properly representing your religion. And this is where the Taliban is like Taco Bell. You see, Taco Bell has been in trouble in the past for supposedly serving tacos that did not have the requisite amount of meat in their filling. In January 2011, a law firm filed a class action lawsuit against the restaurant chain, claiming that their meat products only contained about 35% actual beef. The lawsuit was later settled, with Taco Bell admitting that their meat was about 88% beef, with additional fillers, spices, and seasonings. Now, I am not criticizing them. I could kill an entire bag of Soft Taco Supremes in one sitting. But the takeaway is that there's a lot more meat there than people think. The same could be said for the Taliban. Most journalists and politicians seem to think that they're like the product of some fast food restaurant that loads its food with fillers and additives. To them, the Taliban looked like Islam the same way your nasty deep-fried chicken nuggets look like actual chicken, which is to say, not very. And so they dismiss the Taliban as a mutation or perversion of Islam. Seeing as how the Taliban uses some of the most literal readings of the Islamic holy texts, this claim really is indefensible. The atrocities committed by the Taliban have precedents that can be found in the life and actions of the Prophet Muhammad himself. Historically, the Taliban has used rape as a weapon against its enemies. Sexual assault is a problem in Afghanistan in general, but the Taliban have often used it against the female relatives of soldiers and police who oppose them. They also force underage girls into sex. Muhammad and his crew started doing things like that 1400 years ago. In Surah chapter 4, verse 24, it says, "And all married women are forbidden unto you, save those captives and slaves whom your right hands possess." What does this mean? In the Sunnah, we find the sayings and practices of Muhammad, and there is one entry that explains what Surah 4:24 means. Sunan Abu Dawud 2150 says, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, "The Apostle of Allah sent a military expedition to Attas on the occasion of the Battle of Hunain. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of Apostle of Allah were reluctant to have relations with the female captives because of their pagan husbands. So Allah the Exalted sent down the Quranic verse, 'And all married women are forbidden unto you save those captives whom your right hand possess.'" These texts indicate that women taken captive would become sex slaves. These passages have been used for more than 1,000 years to justify the forcible capture and repeated rape of women, which includes not only adult women, but prepubescent girls as well. The Taliban were heavily criticized when some of them executed 22 Afghan commandos as they tried to surrender. A video showed that the men were clearly unarmed, but the Taliban fighters gunned them down anyway. Of course, killing POWs is something we see in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. Although common Arabian practice was to ransom prisoners or let them go free, there were times when Muhammad executed those who opposed him. This seems to have been rare, but Islamic jurists from the 700s all the way through the medieval period often ruled that it was acceptable to kill prisoners of war. They claimed to base their rulings on Islamic scriptures. And we have a story from the life of Muhammad that illustrates this. The Banu Qurayza were a Jewish tribe in northern Arabia. They were attacked by Muslim forces in AD 627, and every post-pubescent male who had been captured, including both adult men and teenagers, were butchered in a massacre. Estimates vary, but about 700 people plus died by beheading. Now, this mass killing is mentioned in passing in the Quran in Surah 33 and verse 26. The Taliban also has no problem with killing civilians. Just days before the fall of Kabul, Taliban forces began going door to door, insisting that wives of dead or missing Afghan soldiers be made to cook meals for Taliban fighters. One woman, a mother of 4 named Najia, told the men that she was too poor to give them anything. So, they beat her to death in front of her children, detonated a grenade in her home, and left as it burned to the ground. It sounds barbaric, but they were just following the example of the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet began his career as a caravan robber. He didn't conduct military expeditions against armed forces. These were raids on merchant caravans. Typically, prisoners were taken, but sometimes civilians were killed. So this set a precedent that Muslim fighters, like the Taliban, could go up to a civilian, take what they want, and then enslave or murder that person. So, as we can see, the Taliban aren't some deviant Islamic group. They simply follow the pattern of behavior established by Muhammad. And this is something that the Quran commands. In Surah chapter 33, verse 21, "Indeed, in the messenger of Allah, you have an excellent example for whoever has hope in Allah and the last day and remembers Allah often." So there we have it. The Taliban are following the excellent example of the founder of their religion. So back to our original question. How is the Taliban like Taco Bell? Both of them are a lot closer to the real thing than people realize.